Hey everyone, welcome to another Stukent expert session. This is Trevor Erickson with Stukent, and we are excited today to have Dr. Debra Zahay, who is a professor of marketing from Aurora University, on with us. And she's going to be sharing techniques and strategies on how to use online search to build and grow your brand online. Dr. Zahay is going to give us a brief introduction and background of herself, and then she's going to get right into the thick of things, and we're excited to learn from her. And without any further ado, here's Dr. Zahay.
Well, I'm Dr. Debra Zahay. I'm a professor of marketing at Aurora University, and I have been using actually the Stukent simulation. I'm a big fan, and I was delighted to be invited to give one of the webinars in your series where you have experts come in and talk about different areas of digital and internet marketing. And I thought what might be appropriate would be to talk about search today and how relevant it is for branding and overall strategy, and then I'll try to tie it in to the simulation itself and how I think the simulation helps students really understand how things work today. And I did ask my students, I'll tell you a little bit more about what I teach in a second, but I did ask my students what they thought my best material was, and they thought it was search. So I'm going with that. So what I want to do today is I'd like to talk a little bit about who I am. What is digital marketing? Because we hear about that all the time, and how digital marketing then is really changing the face of branding and then the purchase cycle, and then how the simulation really keys into that and reflects the reality of what's going on today. And I'm kind of a hands-on gal, so I always like to give a blueprint or a tactic or something that you can implement. If you're listening to this and you have your own business, which many of my students do, you can implement it for your company strategy, or you can just use it when you're working in your internet or digital marketing class around the simulation. So that's where we're headed today. So I'll start with who I am. I have 17 years of experience in the business world. After my degree at Kellogg, where I did not study marketing, I actually studied information systems and finance. I went to a small data company called Dun & Bradstreet, and then Verizon via MCI. So MCI was purchased by Verizon. So I have a background in both data and telecommunications. But as I was working, I had questions that I just found couldn't be answered in practice. So I went to the University of Illinois to get my PhD. So I'm a Big Ten football gal. And my primary research in my PhD and since then has been in customer information management and how it can actually lead to ultimate firm performance. And actually, I started my PhD in '96, finished in 2000, and some 15 years later have over 700 citations to my articles. So if you're interested in how you can use data for competitive advantage, that's my primary area of interest. I do also some research in innovation, new product development, and then how we teach with technology, since I'm always doing that. So that's kind of who I am from an academic side. I'm also the editor of the Journal of Research and Interactive Marketing, which is a strong second journal in the field. And I'm the co-author of the leading internet marketing textbook, Internet Marketing Integrating Online and Offline Strategies, with Mary Lou Roberts. I have what I call my airplane book, which is called Digital Marketing Management. That led me to thinking, what does digital marketing really mean? So that's a short version of digital marketing management. It's about 140 pages, meant to be read in an airport or when you're on a trip, and it can also be used in short form MBA classes. And I'm slated to update a social media marketing text, and also I am a co-editor on a contemporary database marketing and analytics textbook. So as you can see, I'm kind of a nerd in terms of marketing, and that's been my focus. So my teaching, I focus in our undergraduate digital marketing minor on teaching internet marketing, social media, and IMC, which is integrated marketing communications. And then in our graduate Master of Science in Digital Marketing and Analytics, I teach digital marketing for grad students, database marketing and analytics, and then data mining and visualization. And I put the key competencies in terms of technology that our students get along the way in these programs. And you can see I use the Stukent simulation in both the undergraduate and graduate classes. And the students also get other competencies in the undergrad program. They learn AdWords and participate in the challenge, and they also, in the social media class, become Hootsuite certified and understand how to use Google Analytics. And then in the graduate program, they're getting a good background, not only with starting off with the simulation, which has a great way to understand digital marketing analytics, but also using some of SPSS tools. So that's just kind of who I am. We have another class in our undergraduate digital marketing minor, which is focused on Photoshop and video production. So they get a complete picture of what's going on and are actually well prepared for the marketplace out there. So what does digital marketing really mean? I said I would answer that question. I'm going to take a step back then and look at what's been going on in marketing. I've seen this in the Stukent materials and also in other presentations. This is from my latest book that's coming out. We started out with the direct marketing. That's where my background was, building databases, and our goal was to get a customer response. Then when the internet came along, we wanted to use technology to facilitate that, and we really thought we wanted interactive conversations with our customers. So an interactive conversation means I remember what the customer said, and then in the next time I talk to them, I say what they said and show that I remember. So the poster child for interactivity is Amazon.com, because they remember what I said, then they make me related offers. So I might buy blue shoes and they might make me offers for other types of shoes and things to clean my shoes and things that are related there. So that is what interactivity is. And if you know anything about John Dayton at Harvard, another professor that works in this area, he wrote the initial articles that defined what interactivity meant. But he also wrote an article that said there were unintended consequences from interactivity. And so those unintended consequences from interactivity are what? Who took over the interactive conversation? The customer. The marketer thought they were going to be like the great puppeteer and talking about things to the customer and seeing how they respond and tailoring their offers, and not really thinking that the customer was going to say, hey, wait a minute, you know, I not only do I not want to buy those shoes, I want to completely redesign your shoes. I want to participate other ways on social media. I want to develop my own advertisement for your shoes. And that's really where we are with digital marketing and engagement. It's a much deeper form of the conversation, and it's more geared toward the customer being in charge and control. And then I would just invite people to think about where we're going to go beyond this. I would say certainly we are entering an age of more and more automation in marketing, and so that's certainly somewhere where we could go in the future. So just think about that. Maybe somebody wants to ask a question about that. So digital marketing can be defined then as using a digital technology to facilitate the marketing process, but the end goal of digital marketing is to facilitate our customer both interaction and engagement, that deeper sense of interaction. And I firmly believe that digital marketing is now the responsibility of the executive suite, and that's why I particularly like using the Stukent simulation in my classes. In my book, I say that we need to set objectives across all channels, and that the website is really the key. And that's quite what I like about the simulation, is that almost the first thing you do on there is that you put your website together and figure out what keywords you need to use to draw people to your site so that then you can further market to them. And it doesn't matter really that now we have mobile and all these other platforms, you know, tablets, phablets, whatever you might call them, our mobile phone. It doesn't really matter that there are other ways to get that message out. Usually what we're doing is that we're still driving them back to our website. So even if 60% of emails are now opened on a mobile device, it still is important to have a good website, because more often than not, we're driving people back to our website. We're also doing that in social media, asking them to click and engage with us, maybe sign up for our email list or get a coupon or offer or something like that. So it's really important to have that website in really great shape. And in the simulation, we focus on, we don't have social media up yet, and we don't focus on that. So the simulation kind of mirrors reality in this way. We've got a really good website set up that has keywords that says who we are, and then we can create an email campaign that is in line with that. And we also can do paid search ads, and then it also tells us how we're doing in terms of organic search based on what we've done with our website. So when I work with companies, for example, I say it's really critical to get those web objectives down. What do we want to do? Who are we as a company? And then get our website set up and put those search terms in that website, just like we do with the simulation. I think that's so important. And 9 times out of 10, I work with smaller companies usually. When people say, that they want to do something in terms of paid search or email, I look at the basic website, and the basic website doesn't say who the company is and what their objectives are. So I have some examples of this toward the end, how we can improve this whole process, but think about this chart. This is how I really think that the simulation works and how it totally reflects reality. So another thing that we need to do, and I'm going to thank Dr. Charlotte Mason from the University of Georgia for this, is that we need to think about how we develop our customer life cycle and what our objectives are. Now, traditional customer life cycle is based on the fact that we see customers that we want to attract and acquire and then retain and engage them. So we want to get people to our website through search, social media, email, whatever that might be. And then email really is more of an engagement tool, so I put that over here. But we can retain and engage them. And so we have our prospect, then people become responders, new customers, and then they're either high potential, high value, or low value. And then from there, we move on to the natural cycle, because with the customer life cycle, people don't stay around forever. So they might leave voluntarily, or they may be forced to leave because we're not giving them a package which is attractive to them. And then we go into the win-back process. And what's new recently is the whole idea of lead nurturing and demand generation when people respond. So marketing is taking a key role here when people do get to that website. So in the way I teach this in my class and the process I use with companies, I say these are your overall marketing objectives. Attract or goals, attract and acquire, retain and engage, and then we set specific objectives based on that. And the reason that we need to do this today is that this whole search process and branding are really completely interwoven. The way branding works is that we have our image, we tell our story we can do this through social media, through all our forms of marketing communication, whether it be print media, through search, and through our website, and we try to get people aware of our brand so that they recognize it. And then we have something called brand equity, and this will result in higher search rankings. And I'll tell you a story. I have a friend named Tom Dish who runs a company called Handy Ramp, and the Handy Ramp makes custom ramps for dogs, pets, and as well as disabled people, and it's a very high quality product. And actually, Tom became a search engine expert, or search engine marketing expert through his company. He actually markets ramps, but he doesn't consult necessarily in the search area, but he's been a guest speaker in my company, or in my classes. And about a year ago, he said, "What's wrong with Google, Deborah? I've really been having trouble." And what happened was that Google changed its algorithms to favor larger brands, and larger brands usually have a lot of links coming into them, and so he's been really having trouble. So if you search for pet ramp or disabled ramp, you're likely not to see Handy Ramp up there. You're likely to see Walmart and PetSmart and things like that. And so you really need to have your act together where it comes in search marketing. So to succeed in search marketing, your brands and your products and your company have to be known, and they have to be easily found in search. And in addition to the things that we do in the simulation, we also know that the search engines, in terms of organic search, which is what you don't pay for, that they really like you to do rich media and content. So that's the link between social media and content. I tried for years to get my former program on the front page of Google Organic Search, and as soon as we did some videos and some rich media for the program, it was on the first page in a couple of weeks. And you can see this. This is all documented in Aaron Goldman's book, Everything I Wanted to Know about Marketing. Everything I know about marketing I learned from Google. And so you can check that out. But that's indeed what the search engines really reward. So you've got to make sure that your brand and your company must be known. And you must have something that you can convey quite easily. So the first thing we do in that simulation is to do our web page and try to figure out keywords that people are going to be looking for. And in a real life situation, we want to make sure that our point of difference, or the value we're creating, is also conveyed really easily on that website. And this is why it's so important, because the buying process begins with search. 78% of the buyers of B2B products alone begin that process via a search engine. 93% of consumers begin their process with a search. I think that the tablet scenario in the simulation could be either B2B, B2C. But that's what most people are doing today. They're starting out with search. And so we've got to make sure that our website can be found. And good web design aids search. And part of good web design is having those good keywords. So the traditional purchase journey has really been shaken up by digital marketing and internet marketing. Whereas people had a defined problem, they were made aware of the different alternatives, they put some of them in a consideration set, and then made their purchase, and then we monitored and marketed to them in the post-purchase experience and tried to keep them loyal customers. That's all been turned on its head. What happens now? People conduct research and compare vendors, and before they even contact the salesperson or buy online, they think they know most of what they really need to know. If it's a business-to-business application, they're not only doing online research, but they're working with associations and groups of buyers, like buyers that they might be working with online, vertical sites, as well as going in and looking at vendor sites and comparing things that well. So it is estimated, there have been a number of different studies on this, it's estimated that much of the buying process takes place before that first interaction with the vendor. So about 57% of that buying cycle is complete before we even get to the customer's first contact with the supplier. And depending on the research study, it can be farther over. It can actually be closer to 80 or 90%. So customers want the facts in all areas, and it's not really limited to business or business to consumer. It's not really high ticket versus low ticket items. So people used to really research a car, not necessarily look at something like shampoo, but they have the ability to do research in all these areas now. Definitely for heavy machinery, people would do research in B2B, but now even buying paper clips and comparing them, you can do this over the internet quite easily. So as I alluded to before with the customer life cycle, the sales funnel itself has changed. I used to be a salesperson, and we would get people in, and they would be prospects, and we'd bubble them through, and eventually they'd come out the bottom as customers, otherwise we wouldn't talk to them anymore. And marketing had a very limited view. Sales was all. Now in business to business, we do a lot of lead nurturing. Marketing is very important, and sales comes in at kind of the end in that evaluation and purchase cycle. So because of what's happening, you really need to be found. So that's why I say search is strategy is branding. If we have a good brand, we're going to be found in search. And if we don't know who we are, we can't really define the search terms that we should be using on our website. So in my classes, I say that a good positioning statement we should work off of is to the target market. Our company name is the product category. And then what makes our point of difference? So I often use Snickers because we're usually teaching in the afternoon and we're all kind of hungry. So two people looking for a snack. Snickers can be the snack food. And what they really say their point of difference is that they're going to satisfy your hunger quicker than any other. They've used hungry, why wait, and things like that as their tagline. Now the truth is that a Snickers bar is peanuts and nougat, whatever that is, and caramel and chocolate, and about 300 or 400 calories. And if you ate anything with all that sugar and calories in the afternoon, you'd certainly get a temporary lift. But we're trying to position ourselves in the minds of the customer in a certain way, so that's how they think about our product. And so what we need to do is think about that in terms of search as well, and strategy. So who am I, and then how can people find me online? So my practical tips for doing this are to develop a list of what makes your company unique and write down how you might deliver value. And then use Google Trends. I don't know if you've used Google Trends for search, but it's great. It can tell you what's trending right now, what keywords are going up and going down. And that's how I rebranded our program here from interactive marketing to digital marketing, looking at the trends. And you can also use Keyword Tool IO if you have that available. What Keyword Tool IO does is that it scrapes all the major search engines, their suggested terms. So even if you don't have access to Google AdWords, you can actually use that to develop a list of keywords that might relate to your company or your brand value. And in the simulation, of course, we have that already. We can look and see which popular terms are available, and that's really very helpful. But once you leave the simulation and the safety of the simulation and start working for a real company, these are tools that can be quite helpful. What Google says also, in addition to really focusing on a number of things such as a good brand and branded site that a lot of people are interacting with and having rich media content, they're also looking in search on focusing on the customer's intent. What are they really trying to do when they search? So I suggest to kind of put this all together to make a list of your broad marketing objectives like we talked about in the customer life cycle, which are attract, acquire, retain, and engage, and then group the keywords into above categories that might relate to those objectives. And then develop a list of goals. What do you want people to do that are categorized along those terms? So if you're trying to have a broad marketing objective of attract, then your goal might be to get people to come to the site to register, for example. So I wanted to look at an example and using this Keyword Tool IO to show how we can do this. And I'm going to use the example from the simulation. So we have the largest selection of Android tablet computers, might be something that we think is unique about our site. We want to attract customers to our website. So I'm going to go into Keyword Tool IO and see if I can develop a list of keywords. So I've looked for Android tablet selection. And according to Keyword Tool IO, which lets you look at a number of different places for search, on Google, there's only about 18 suggested terms here, which is not a lot. Now we can't get a look at the traffic for these terms, but we can see how many terms are related to that. And so it's not a lot, so I'm thinking that probably that's not a good way to differentiate ourselves. But if I just look for keyword Android tablet, I get lots of different possible suggestions for keywords. So my new example might be that our website can help people compare tablets, which would also be true, I believe, for the website in the simulation. And our broad objective then is we want to attract customers to our website. We could use Android, I have table, that should be tablet, Android tablet versus iPad. Oh, I see the T got moved over. And similar terms like that. So you can see up here people search for Android tablet versus iPad quite often, and reviews. So we can use those kinds of terms. And the goal might be to have them register for our email newsletter, download a comparative white paper, etc. I do want to end with a word about email because that was in my original graphic a few slides ago where I talked about the importance of integrating the website with email design and paid and natural search. Email is still widely used, and I think it's the unsung hero or engine of internet marketing. It's how we develop relationships with our customers. We're still getting fairly good click-through rates of between 2 and 5%, or more than double than what's going on with traditional direct mail. So we can't ignore that. And many times in the simulation, I know my students kind of ignore email and don't get to that until the end. But really, we need to do all of this at once. We need to pick our search terms, put them on our website, put them in our emails, and also focus on them in our paid search campaign so that paid, organic, and email can work together with our website. So in summary, digital marketing means using digital technology to create engagement, and customers want to engage us online, and this simulation really reflects the trends in digital marketing. So I suggest a process where you define your strategy, understand what your broad objectives are according to the customer life cycle, use keywords to reinforce your website overall strategy and goals, and optimize paid and organic search, and don't forget about email. Okay, I see some questions here. What are some ways to attract the high-value customers in the customer life cycle? That's really a good question. Really what we're trying to do is attract customers, and then through lead nurturing, identify then which ones can be high value. Sometimes if we're using a more direct marketing approach, we can, through customer database marketing, which I also teach, we can then figure out what are the characteristics of our ideal customer, and using database marketing, we can go after them. This is also possible to do online now, where when people call in, if we have or log in rather, if we have information about them, we can identify them to some respect. In some respect, we can see who might potentially be a high-value customer. The other question is how to stand out when the consumer compares my company or product with my competitors. You know, that's a really good question. I think this goes to something that I wanted to talk about anyway, which is how paid and organic search really work together. You know, you're always trying to make sure that you keep your brand story going, and you're reinforcing that. And I often suggest to companies that in addition to optimizing for organic search, that they do paid search like we have in the simulation, or Google AdWords or Facebook ads or things like that. Because when you're searching, if you come up very highly in organic search and then there's also an ad, I think it has been shown in the research that people do respond to that. And so that's another way to really, I think, to stand out. Not only do I have enough money to have an ad, but I know I come up very highly in natural search.
All right, I think that's all of the questions that are in the queue. As a student, another professor, what's the best way to follow you and learn more about what you're doing online and with your students in the classroom?
Yeah, I do have a blog. We have a Google Plus community for internet marketing. That's for professors. We have a Facebook page for students. We have a number of different ways to keep in touch. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. Just type in Debra Zahay Blatz. You'll find me there. And if you have a specific question about how to stay connected, I put my email address on here. So I would
Perfect.
love to hear from people. I enjoy working with other professors who are teaching in this area as well as students. A lot of students connect to me, and I'm happy to help them out.
Awesome. I'll grab the Google Plus community page, and I believe you said there's a Facebook page as well, right?
Yes, would you like me to get that information?
Yeah, I'll grab those from you after we're done with this, and then I'll link them up on your expert session page for everyone.
Oh, okay, great. I didn't have a chance to. Okay, great. That'd be good.
Yeah. So, anyways, Dr. Zahay, we're extremely privileged and want to send a big thank you to you for sharing your time and your knowledge with us on the different strategies on how to use online search to grow your brand online in today's world.